Story 1. Salem's Lot is phenomenal from start to finish. It is chilling and terrifying with a satisfying slow burn. Story 2. The Hobbit. One day, I was reading it in bed when my mother came into the room. I instinctively hid The Hobbit under the covers, as I would with a magazine. In my mind, anything that enjoyable had to be against the rules. Story 3. The Handmaid's Tale is much better than any of the shows or movies. Middlesex, Cloud Atlas, Where the Red Fern Grows, and Cujo are also notable works. Story 4. How Stella Got Her Groove Back. Acid Row. Junk. To Kill a Mockingbird. The Color Purple. The Penal Colony. Story 5. Mists of Avalon. Star Wars. Heir to the Empire Trilogy by Timothy Zahn. A History of the World in 6 Glasses. Story 6. Pillars of the Earth. If you enjoy that, try The Sun in Splendor. Both are historical fiction. Story 7. Dan Simmons' Hyperion and his other books, as well as the Dune series. Additionally, how could I forget Anne Rice's The Vampire Lestat? Story 8. I remember getting so into the Hunger Games books that by the time I was reading the final one, I was pacing. When I reached the big plot twist 3/4 of the way through, I threw my book. Story 9. Fiction. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. Nonfiction. Truman by David McCullough. Story 10. November 22nd, 63. Lords of the Realm. Animal Farm, which I read as a high school senior, was the first book I ever read from start to finish in one day. Story 11. The most recent book I finished is Remarkably Bright Creatures. Now I want to befriend an octopus. Story 12. Inferno by Niven and Pornell. It is the only book I have ever read from cover to cover without putting it down. When I finished it, I gave it to my roommate, and he read it from cover to cover without putting it down. It is not a literary masterpiece, but it is a great piece of storytelling. Story 13. Any of the books that feature Sam Vims of the City Watch in Ankh-Morpork by Terry Pratchett are excellent. Guards, Men-at-Arms, and Feet of Clay showcase incredible writing, wit, dark humor, sarcasm, and world building. However, I can always return to the one book that introduced me to Pratchett's works, Small Gods. Story 14. Project Hail Mary. I couldn't put it down after the first chapter, which was possibly the shortest first chapter in literary history. Story 15. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I was in my 20s. To be honest, it was the title of the first chapter that captured my attention. The Boy Who Lived. I was also a boy who lived. I wasn't expected to have lived very long. Story 16. The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Daisy Jones and the Six. A Bend in the Road. The Bell Jar. A Certain Hunger. A Little Life. The Psalm of Achilles. Any Sally Rooney book. Story 17. The Little Prince. I didn't read it until I was an adult. I saw a quote from it somewhere online when I was working in Old Street, London, and thought, oh, that's a cool quote. I should buy that book. There was a little bookshop at Old Street Station, so I went in there on my way home, and they had it. Couldn't put it down. My commute home was an hour and a half. I used to take the Underground, then the train to Croydon, and finally the tram to South Norwood. Later, after the July 7th bombings, I found that it was actually a really enjoyable walk from Old Street to London Bridge, so I did that instead of taking the Underground. I started reading The Little Prince on the Underground, continued on the train, on the tram, and then kept reading it until I went to bed. I discovered that I could read the entire book during my commute at a leisurely pace, 3 hours round trip. I did this for about a week, rereading the book over and over. Story 18. I'm pretty sure I read The Martian in one day, staying up until 3 a.m. to finish it. Project Hail Mary was also phenomenal, both by Andy Weir. Story 19. Ballad of the Whiskey Robber. A true story of bank heists, ice hockey, Transylvanian pelt smuggling, moonlighting detectives, and broken hearts. Story 20. The God Delusion. Richard Dawkins has a clear writing style, and he appears well-informed, having been a professor at Oxford for many years. Story 21. Keys to the Kingdom. The best way to describe these books is that they take place in a hidden world that blends fairy tales with steampunk elements. The books are not very long, and there are only 7 of them, so I highly recommend them if you want a series to read without it taking months or years to complete. Story 22. The last book I read was The Housekeeper by Joy Fielding. Like most library books, I often borrow them but don't always open them. However, I happened to start this one on a Friday and ended up reading 50 pages. I read another 50 pages on Saturday and another 50 on Sunday. Then, on Monday, which was a regular workday, I read 200 pages and finished the book. Fortunately, I was working from home. Story 23. Krampus by Brum is a dark fantasy horror story about a feud between Krampus and Santa Claus, with a mortal man caught in the middle. It may sound silly, but it is truly captivating. Brum also illustrates his own books, so the imagery is incredible. Story 24. Red Dragon when I was 13. I followed it up with the novel adaptation of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie. Story 25. Like others in this discussion, I remember as a child I powered through the Harry Potter series and the Del Toro Quest series. I always had a soft spot for The Invention of Hugo Cabret. As well, that was probably my favorite standalone book ever. As an adult, I love The Name of the Wind and the rest of the Kingkiller Chronicles books. Story 26. If We Were Villains by M. L. Rio is a good book. I have read it several times, and it keeps getting better. Story 27. The Green Mile by Stephen King was originally released as a series of approximately 90-page novellas. I don't remember how often they were released, but it was torturous waiting for the next one. I was young, so I had to wait for my mom to buy each one and read it before handing it off to me. I still have them on my bookshelf. Story 28. The Book Thief. Winter's Tale. A brief history of everyone who ever lived. The Doomsday Machine. Confessions of a Nuclear War Planner. Steel Beach. The Ozark Trilogy. Persuasion. Story 29. The often underappreciated series by Rick Yancey, The Monstrumologist, is classified as young adult literature, but it offers a brutal and unflinching look at the insanity of a parental figure, firmly placing it in my recommendations for millennials dealing with aging parents. It presents a violent, sad, and graphic exploration of our superstitious humanity. It is also filled with impactful quotes like this: "It occurred to me that aberrance is a wholly human construct. There are no such things as monsters outside the human mind. We are vain and arrogant, evolution's highest achievement and most dismal failure, prisoners of our self-awareness and the illusion that we stand in the center, that there is us and then there is everything else but us." Story 30. Operation Dark Heart is a non-fiction true story about a CIA operative's experience in Afghanistan. Before publication, the CIA redacted many important details, which made it the most frustrating yet captivating read I have ever experienced. Story 31. Ready Player One has been one of those books that I fell in love with. I am a very slow reader, but I felt that I flew through this book. Story 32. I have a few recommendations. I had to read Maestro for school, and I was one of the students in the class known for being late with my homework, along with my friend who sat next to me. We were assigned to read 2 chapters over the weekend, and both of us completed it, though the teacher didn't believe us at first. Le Comte de Monte Cristo. I should disclose that I haven't finished it yet. I still have about 100 pages to go. I strongly suggest reading it in the original French if possible, as there are many linguistic jokes and plays on words that do not translate well into English. The Cthulhu Mythos. This is a collection of short stories by H.P. Lovecraft that all connect in various ways. While it is very interesting, the format is great as well. You can jump in, read a complete tale, and then step away. Since the stories are somewhat compartmentalized, if you need to put it down for a week or two, you won't have to reread to remember what was happening. Exactly by Simon Winchester. This book tells the history and development of metrology, the science of measurement, through time and shows how the development of certain tools has made things more precise. It is not told strictly from an engineering perspective, so you don't necessarily need that kind of education or experience to enjoy it. However, those who do will find it particularly engaging. My absolute favorite, though, is Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Story 33, Nonfiction. A Natural History of Seeing by Simon Ings. Everything you never knew you wanted to know about how eyes work. Fiction. The Grand Ellipse by Paula Volsky. Like a Victorian-era season of The Amazing Race, but set in a fantasy world where magic can exist. Story 34, Chicken Hawk by Bob Mason is a great read about his experiences as a pilot. Don't Tell Mom I Work on the Rigs. She Thinks I'm a Piano Player in a Whorehouse by Paul Carter is hilarious from cover to cover. Story 35, Earth's Children by Jean M. Owl is a series of 5 books set during the time of the Neanderthals. The 5th book is disappointing because the author passed away before completing it, and the person who finished it did not effectively convey the story. Clan of the Cave Bear. 2. Valley of Horses. 3. The Mammoth Hunters. 4. The Plains of Passage. 5. Homecoming. Story 36. Every book I read keeps me interested from beginning to end. However, I mainly read thrillers and mysteries. No matter what, I always want to figure out what is happening. Some books are better than others, but I really can't get enough. Story 37, House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. Someone lent it to me because they thought I would like it, and I did. Story 38, The Drawing of the Three. I have fond memories of relaxing and reading this book in a 3-foot-high inflatable pool at my friend's house after work while he was away in New York. Story 39, Clive Barker's The Scarlet Gospels and Douglas Adams' The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I finished each one in less than a day. I couldn't put them down. Story 40. Swan Song by Robert McCammon was a fantasy that was both brutal and realistic. All the books we read in high school felt like a chore, but this was the first book that truly captivated me. The first chapter was intense, and I could visualize the scenes as I read. Some aspects of the ending may feel cliched now, but considering it was written in the 1980s, it makes sense. I remember the skull on the cover because my mother loved it throughout my childhood. She gifted it to me for Christmas, and since it was the only book ever given to me, I gave it a shot and was hooked from chapter 1. Story 41. Nearly all of King's books have kept me interested, but this one had me thinking about it constantly and left an incredible impression on me that none of his other works have. From beginning to end, it was a beautiful and fascinating story. Story 42. It's been over 50 years, but I was about 20 when I decided to read what all the excitement about The Godfather was. I took it to bed at about 10 p.m. and finished it in time to be at work 9 hours later. I was sleep-deprived, though. Story 43. The Passage by Justin Cronin captivated me more than any book ever has, especially in the first 100 pages. The rest of the book is phenomenal. Unfortunately, The Passage is part of a trilogy. The second book is mediocre, and I did not enjoy the third book. However, the first one is brilliant. Story 44. So far, I have read only 2 books. Neil Postman, The Disappearance of Childhood. Charles Dickens' David Copperfield. I definitely need to read more. Story 45. I am currently reading Juror 3 by James Patterson, and it is keeping me engaged. It is an easy read but entertaining. Story 46. The Things We Can See Only When We Slow Down by Heyman Sunim is a book about patience, and it is an excellent read. Story 47. The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett is outstanding. If you want something shorter and more enjoyable, consider The Art of Racing in the Rain by Garth Stein. Story 48. The Blue Mage Raised by Dragons. Dungeon Crawler Carl. He Who Fights with Monsters. Cheek Potion Maker. Unexpected Healer. Two-Week Curse. Overpowered Dungeon Boy. Story 49. I don't know why, but The Almost King kept me wondering what would happen next. Even though it isn't that good and the writer's style makes it a little hard to read. It is the second book in a series, and you don't need to read the previous book. The story takes place in a steampunk world with continents separated by storm walls. The main character is a young person trying to escape the military who ends up working in a workshop with a tiny skyship. Story 50. I'm not one for romance, but Fourth Wing is shockingly good. The second book in the series is mediocre, but the third one is just as good as the first. Story 51. The entire Throne of Glass series is notable. I'm not a big fan of the author, but that series was exceptional. Story 52, The Grapes of Wrath. Read it from front to back. Did nothing else. I am afraid to pick it up again. Story 53, I've forgotten most of them. The Stand by Stephen King. Sometimes a Great Notion by Ken Kesey. Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. And The Lord of the Rings. Story 54. The Journey to the Center of the Earth is an engaging book I had to read for homework. We were given time to read it consistently without impacting our other classes. I completed the entire book in 72 hours. Roma Aeterna is not without its flaws, but it is an interesting read that can be comfortably completed in no time. Story 55. Recently read The Ferryman by Justin Cronin. Couldn't put it down. The same goes for his Passage trilogy. Story 56. I haven't finished it yet, but I am most of the way through The Arabian Nights. It's interesting because it is a story told by a person who, within their story, tells another person a story, and then within that story, someone tells another story. It's like story inception. Story 57. Neuromancer by William Gibson. Pattern Recognition by William Gibson. The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. Reach for the Sky by Paul Brickhill. The entire Master and Commander series by Patrick O'Brien. Story 58. Eaters of the Dead by Michael Crichton. The 13th Warrior was adapted from the book. I really didn't put the book down until I was finished. Story 59. Several books. Fluke. Or I Know Why the Winged Whale Sings by Christopher Moore. The Stupidest Angel by Christopher Moore. The Music of the Dolphins by Karen Hesse. The My Teacher is an Alien series by Bruce Coville. Into the Night by Linda Lael Miller. Most of these I have read several times. Sure, some I read as a child, but books are books. If the story is good, who cares? Story 60. The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. The entire Cinder series by Marissa Meyer. I read the series at least once a year. Story 61. Starter Criminal. Have you ever had a book that was too fun to put down? It's a clever sci-fi comedy set in a captivating criminal underworld, and I want more from this world. Good luck with the dolphins. Story 62. Earlier this month, I sat down and read The Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch all in one sitting. I don't remember the last time I finished a novel that quickly, but it had been a long time. This is at least partly because this particular book is fairly short. Story 63. Shot in the Heart. Until I read it as a teenager, I had no idea one of my family members was involved in the story. No, not Gary Gilmore. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.